Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. Geeky Sparkles is sitting this video out, so I'm going to talk about comic books. I'm going to talk about the X-Men, which the X-Men were my favorite comics, multiple X-Men titles back in the day. We're going to talk about Rob Liefeld, who is a very notable X-Men creator. He created, of course, Deadpool and Cable and so many of the X-Force characters, and he's been very vocal about his dislike of current year X-Men, and I'm glad to see it, because I know it's not just me. The X-Men are nowhere near where they used to be even a couple of decades ago. I mean, it really is not good. They were going to reboot the X-Men. They had, Gail Simone doing it, and just that thing just landed with a thud. The X-Men book should sell as well as Batman, if not better. That's how it was back in the day. That is not how it is now. It's kind of depressing because it's such wasted potential, right? And a lot of that is that the X-Men, from what I've seen, the political angle has overtaken the action angle. And yes, the X-Men have always been political to a degree, but there was also action. A lot of the X-Men comics I've picked up off and on over the last couple of years have just been a lot of, standing around and talking about politics or talking about relationships or what, what I'm saying? Like, that's not the X-Men. That's not the X-Men. The best X-Men we've had, in my opinion, in the last decade and a half was actually X-Men 97. Bo DeMeo got the assignment, I believe. You may disagree. I know some people don't like X-Men 97. I actually liked it quite a bit, but that is my opinion. I'm entitled to it. So there you go. So Rob's opinion is the X-Men were the Lamborghini of comic books, and now it's a Pinto. That is scathing, but he's also been taking Marvel to task for how it treats creators. And let's be clear here. Rob signed a deal with Marvel pre-Disney, right? So my understanding is he gets royalties from Deadpool. So every time they sell Deadpool stuff, he gets paid. I'm sure he made out pretty well from Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm sure he did. But that is not the deal that most creatives at Marvel have now. In fact, there have been a lot of complaints about how poorly these people are treated. And I'm like, you're part of the Disney machine now. As a guy who worked on Disney comics for like 15 years, they own your ass, right? They own your stuff. Whatever you create, they can republish it from now until the end of time. They do not have to give you any additional compensation. Your work for hire, it's understood. But again, his deal predates that. So we're going to talk about this and kind of the utter state, I guess, of X-Men. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Go out to more.clownfishtv.com. That's more.clownfishtv.com for more Clownfish TV. So, yeah, I've been watching this with great interest. Rob Liefeld tearing X-Men apart because I know he did a podcast episode a couple of months ago. I think he's done another one too, talking about the utter state of X-Men. And it is depressing because as someone who grew up reading the X-Men and who was into the X-Men when they finally had their big mainstream breakthrough in the early 90s, and X-Men was everywhere. I mean, we had them in the arcades. We had them at, what was it, Pizza Hut. We had, we had action figures. We had a cartoon show. I mean, it was insane in the early to mid 90s, just how popular the X-Men were and how far Marvel has strayed from the formula that actually worked. Like, they've forgotten why these characters were popular. And yeah, they were always, even though they're mutants, they were always a little more human, I think, than some of Marvel's other characters. They had their quirks and their insecurities, and they weren't loved like the Avengers. But everything that I've seen now just points to them just being absolutely insufferable and sometimes just outright evil, like the whole Krakoa thing. And that brought in a whole new audience, right? That they thought they were on Krakoa for so damn long that audience thinks that the X-Men is basically about sitting around bitching about politics and having coffee. That's what they think. And 3 Ways on the Moon. That's what they think the X-Men are about, and they're not. And I'm hoping, don't give me hope. I'm hoping that in Doomsday we actually see some proper X-Men, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm really not. I don't think Disney gets it either. I do think that they've veered away from the disastrous notion that they were going to make the X-Men the X-People or the X-They-Thems or whatever the hell they were going to do, because that was Victoria Alonso. I think that was her idea, that they were going to just be the X-People, the mutants or whatever, and they weren't going to be the X-Men because that's misogyny, and she got her ass fired. So hopefully that idea went out the door with her. But yeah, this is pretty damning. The X-Men was the Lamborghini of comic books. Now it's a Pinto. Christian here says, I don't think X-Men ever recovered after 2008. The decline was definitely there in my mind in the early 2000s. I agree with that. There were a lot of characters like in the late 90s that nobody talks about now. We had Maggot. Remember Maggot? We had Marrow and these other like very 90s quirky X-Men. Now, I liked Generation X. I thought Generation X was pretty cool. And he was very much a product of his time, but those characters I thought were pretty cool. Crowd Logic says, I've been reading comics since 4 years old. It's absolutely not the same. No, I don't think people care like they do. I mean, look, I'm not saying everybody doesn't care, but I think that people working for Marvel and DC, unless you're like a top shelf creator, there really is no incentive to give a shit beyond just cranking out your pages and calling it a day because you don't own anything, right? Where all the excitement is right now, it's at Image and other indie publishers, because the creators actually own these characters. And I think that there are, decades of reasons as to why you shouldn't, create brand new characters for Marvel or DC. And that's why we don't see new characters for Marvel or DC. Because even something that's an offshoot like Miles Morales' Spider-Man, right? I'm hearing that the artist, and I forget her name off the top of my head, but she's very good. And I do like the Miles Morales costume. But she's complaining that she's not getting paid for Miles Morales, and she co-created him. Well, it was an offshoot derivative, you know what I'm saying? But like it was a character. I guess Miles Morales is his own character because all the toys say Miles Morales, but she's not getting paid. Whatever happened to Sideways in DC? Remember Sideways? They actually attempted to make a new character. It's just like nobody talks about this character anymore. And I think that's kind of what's going on here. I think everybody's kind of afraid to make new characters because they don't know what's going to happen. Excel Saga says, Rob, we badly need a cleaned house. I'm not kidding. We need to return to how you all made the stuff in the 80s, 90s. There's no incentive to. Everything is tanked. Why read this stuff when manga is right there in the shelves? That's a big part of it. That is a big part of it. Can't believe you would disparage the Ford Pinto like that. Kaboom. I just took all the X-Men books off my pull list. For the first time in 40 plus years, I won't be reading X-Men. That's how bad it is. This person says, as far as movies go, does it really matter? The gold rush is over and Marvel did more than clean up. They left nothing but scraps for everybody else. Regardless of how good the new movies are, only the hardcore comics fans are excited now, regardless of whether or not it's Marvel or DC. That's true. And you're not allowed to say anything negative. You can't say anything negative about Supergirl or you're going to have a bunch of bots jumping down your throat. Like, it is insane. I don't even think the Snyder Bros were as crazy as the Supergirl bros or bots or whatever the hell is going on. Like, I have seen people just get completely just upended over the freaking Supergirl, which I'm sorry. It looks like a very James Gunn movie. And if that's your thing, that's fantastic. Good for you. But I'm like, whatever. Lots of issues, but big one is too many characters that no one cares about. Yeah. The other is the way they do seasons every year or two. They completely upend storytelling for the sake of fitting nicely in trades. Serialized storytelling doesn't exist anymore. That is a big part of it. Actually, I almost feel like they would be better off let's just do a quarterly X-Men book. I know it's a bad idea. Let's do a quarterly X-Men book that's like a 96-page trade. And that's it. We do, just our books. We just do them that way. Because what's the point? They're going to be a trade anyway. That's where you're going with all of it. All roads lead to the trade. And then after that, it leads to Ollie's and then the dump. Because a lot of stuff's not worth it anymore. But yeah, X-Men's damn disappointing. So this was not the first time he took X-Men to task, though. This was back in April. According to Comic Book Club Live, Rob Liefeld slams Marvel for X-Men Trainwreck. Kickstarter allows Simpson comic. What they allow? Simpson comic? Okay. Well, here, we'll read the Rob Liefeld part. Rob Liefeld slams Trainwreck X-Men line Marvel execs. Liefeld may have already publicly announced his permanent exit from Marvel, but he's so over them that he's taking the social media and also an entire podcast to explain what he considers a train wreck of the X-Men line and why multiple Marvel execs should be fired. No, I agree with him. Marvel's not in a good place right now. I had the opportunity, thank God, to talk to Jim Shooter at length at a convention last year before he passed. It was about 6 months before he died. And I asked him, pointedly, like, what is wrong with Marvel? What's wrong with DC? Can it be fixed? And he told me no. He told me not with current leadership. He said they do not understand the characters, what readers are looking for. He said they're basically just suits trying to keep their jobs. And that was very harsh criticism from him. Jim Shooter never pulled punches. But he was like, yeah, I even had, he said something to the effect of like, I had a chance to come in and help those guys or whatever. And I didn't want to do it, or they didn't want me to do it. A lot of people didn't like Jim Shooter, but the X-Men that we know now, they came about on his watch, right? Shooter was a tough nut, but he's from Pittsburgh. That's how we roll, right? It's character through adversity, right? It's a very tough place to live. The weather sucks here. That might be part of it. But so he was just like, nobody at Marvel right now could write that ship. They'd have to clean house. Per The Beat, Liefeld recently explained on social media that his DMs are filled with comic book professionals lamenting what a train wreck the X-Men office is. Sad. It's all Tumblr fanfic. It is. Like, the X-Men are the most Tumblr-y, gayest bunch of heroes ever. Seriously, the X-Men books that I've read over the last couple of years, there have been a lot of them because there's nothing really to interest me, to be honest, but they feel like IDW comics. They feel like bad IDW comics. And the X-Men should be a lot better than that. It should be, but they've really lost the plot. And again, you've got people in there that want to be activists first. And that was, the politics were always part of it, but now it's front and center. The relationships and the shipping is front and center. It's just boring as fuck. The X-Men is just boring. It's just they're boring books. Not only that, but Liefeld in the same thread demanded that the guys at the top, Dan Buckley, David Bogart, and David Gabriel, a lot of Daves and Dans. The two Daves and the Dan all have to go because they have no new moves. Furthermore, Marvel Quotaverse is what's crushing publishing. Always a slew of new number ones with limited lifespan, quick cancellation. We're closer to all new number ones every month. When I was a kid and I first started reading comics, and this would have been the 80s, I'd go to the newsstand, and every once in a while I'd see like a number one or number two, and I'd pick it up because I'm like, it looks interesting or whatever. But for the most part, I went for the books that were established because I figured they must be good because they've been on the stands that long. Right? This book has to be good because it's had 200 or 300 issues. So people must really like it. Right? And it was daunting to an extent to pick up a book, that you've never read before, a title you've never read before. And there was always a chance that you would be walking into the middle of a storyline or whatever, but it wasn't like it is now. Back then it was like you might have a 2-part storyline, but they always did a nice recap too. Marvel, especially, like you pick up a Marvel comic, and that was part of the Shooter era. You pick up a Marvel comic and they'd tell you on the first page of the Marvel comic, here's who these characters are. Here's what happened. And then anytime they would reference an older comic, they would put a little asterisk in there and say, hey, see Spider-Man 148 or whatever, if you want details for that. Oh, now I got to go to the comic shop. Now I got to go pick up Spider-Man 148. Now you're just touring it, right? So things have changed then. It used to be like, I got to save my money and go get Spider-Man 148 because I got to know what happened. And now you're just touring it, right? It's just, it's weird. And the people that are defending modern Marvel and defending modern X-Men, I'm going to be honest, most of them, I don't think they actually buy the books. They're like, well, we read these comics. Yeah, do you buy them? I think a lot of you are too broke ass to buy comics. Hell, comics are expensive for me. $5 a pop for like 20 some pages. And how many comics you got to buy a month to keep up with everything? I mean, we're talking hundreds of dollars a month in floppy comics. So I wait for the trades. Even like I love Energon Universe. Pretty much everything they've done, I've loved it. I usually wait for the trades now. I picked up the first couple issues. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to like this. I'm going to wait for the trade because it's more durable. I'm not a collector. Like, I don't really give a shit about bagging and boarding. I like to read my books. And I don't feel bad about, dog earring or whatever, a trade as I would, a collector's item or whatever. So I usually wait for the trades now too. But, and I could buy an Energon trade on Amazon for like $13. or whatever, $12 sometimes. And, you know, the MSRP on that's like $20. It's a much better deal, right? It is. And by the time I get around to reading it, you know, so it's, I mean, the whole thing has changed. But I think a lot of these people, they don't pay for them. I think a lot of them are torrenting these books because that audience is used to everything being free. That audience, I recognize kind of the types of people because we used to do webcomics, and I just recognize that particular kind of audience. They're terminally online and they know where to go find free comics. In my opinion, that's what they're doing is they're torrenting the comics, right? So again, you got to kind of listen to your customers, but then the people buying the comics, I don't even know if they're reading the comics. I think they're just buying them, throwing them in a bag and whatever, because I've done it for 40 years, right? Buy X-Men because I've done it for 40 years, even though it's not worth buying now. But people are taking a piss on Rob Liefeld. I know a lot of people are like, it's sour grapes and he's just mad at Marvel. I'm like, this guy, to the best of my knowledge, has one of the only, or probably has the best deal Marvel's got now, because I know he has some kind of a royalty structure around Deadpool, and that just does not happen. So, you know, it would be to his benefit for him to be a Marvel cheerleader and to sell as much Deadpool shit as he could, so his kids and his kids could have, you know, retirement. But that doesn't happen anymore. That was pre-Disney, and he was smart enough to sign that deal. And I don't know if he pushed for it or what, but my understanding is that was not a typical deal, because there are a lot of older creators that died penniless, right? I mean, Peter David should not have died penniless. It's really, really sad. They said, well, a lot of this comes off as sour grapes as usual. There's a glimmer of truth inside Liefeld's blustering. Specifically, as we previously reported, while Marvel is dominating market share in the comic book industry, a lot of that can be chalked up to what he is terming the quotaverse. Yes. To be clear, nobody's trying to make bad comics. No, I don't think they're trying to. I think that they're hiring people as cheaply as possible and cranking out as much stuff as possible. So it's going to happen. The hamburger's not going to look the way it does on the menu board because you're slamming the hamburgers out too damn fast, and you're hiring new people and they don't really understand how to make the hamburgers. That's what I think is actually going on. In fact, they're actively attempting to make good comics, but it is clear that the amount of variant covers, new number ones, nonstop legacy numbered anniversary issues are creating a choke point in comic book stores similar to blockbuster movies filling up every screen in the Cineplex. Well, that's not happening anymore. We're currently seeing growth in sales across the industry. It's a smaller bubble than it was decades ago, and that bubble bursting would be all the more cataclysmic. It is 6 or 8 months after this was written, 8 months, and the bubble is bursting. Save for a couple of titles, you know, again, Energon, Absolute Batman, whatever. The bubble's bursting. Diamond filed for Chapter 7. Shops are pivoting to games. I mean, you can talk about, you know, all these new comic shops are opening. No, they're geek emporiums. They're selling other stuff. They have to. You cannot survive on new monthly comics and occasional back issues from the last, you know, couple of years or whatever. Vintage stuff, yeah, you sell some comics for a couple $1,000 a pop, your shop can stay open. That's where the money's coming from. Creators are broke ass. You know, so many creators that don't have good deals are out on social media talking about it. They don't know how to pay their rent. They don't know how to pay their bills. I mean, it's not a good situation. There is no way you can spin this to the positive unless you have a room temperature IQ. I'm just saying. I do believe Rob Liefeld is correct. Do I think he's a bit bitter? Yeah, look, Rob has always been very outspoken. I think Rob says shit that other pros won't say, but he also has the benefit of financial security compared to other pros. And I think because he was very outspoken and he was very shrewd in business, guys like him and Todd McFarlane and Robert Kirkman and Mark Miller and these guys actually could see the writing on the wall, and they will all tell you that things aren't great in comics right now and you got to do some other shit. I'm just saying. Anyway, there we go, guys. A pinto. Gonna wrap it up. Please subscribe. We'll talk later.